Hey guys, it's Lauren here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is gonna be my first wrap-up video, my June wrap-up, and this is honestly the most books I've read in a month in like a solid 4 years. I don't know, I've been going crazy, but yeah, 10 books may not be a lot to some people, but it's a lot for me, so I would like the applause. I read about 10 books this month. Yes, I believe it's 10 books, if not 11. I'm really happy about it. And this month, because of everything that's been going on, I literally just was not in the mood to really read any of the like books with white voices. I wasn't really like for that right now. This month I decided to focus on reading more LGBTQ plus books and also books centering Black people, but specifically about Black love. And that was what I was in the mood for. I really was not in the mood to read books about white voices, like cis white voices, for obvious reasons. So I read mostly LGBTQ plus books and books centering like Black people, and yeah, I actually had a pretty good time. Without further ado, let's just get right into it. The first book that I read this month, which technically I read towards the end of May, but I'm counting it for June because it's whatever, I wanted to talk about it. It was Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I like this book a lot. It was another book in verse, and basically it's this book about the story of two half-sisters that don't know each other exist on the plane over, like from New York to their father ended up dying in a plane crash. Following those events, these two sisters learn about each other and they kind of process their father's death in their own separate, unique ways. And it also was surprisingly an LGBTQ plus book, which was a plus because this is a book I read before I dedicated my time into reading more LGBTQ plus books. And there's a really cute lesbian romance in there. I love to see it. And yeah, no, it was a good book. I really enjoyed that book because, for one, it's Elizabeth Acevedo. Even though it was written in verse, like, I still freaking enjoyed it. It's not my favorite in comparison to The Poet X, which was Acevedo's debut novel, but it's totally fine. I still liked it anyway. It tackled a lot of things concerning like sisterhood, sexual assault, differences of culture you'd experienced. I just really enjoyed it. I feel like I learned a lot. Even though it was not my favorite of Acevedo's, it was still an enjoyable book. It was well written, as per usual. Couldn't expect any less from her. The next book I read this month was Beloved by Toni Morrison. I made a whole video about this, and it's part of my Miseducation of War and Cheese series where I explore Black stories and Black themes that are in these books. So if you would like to follow along, I post those about every week or so, and yeah, it's just this new series I decided to start because clearly we need to read more Black books and actually analyze it through the Black gaze. So yeah, but I decided to read Beloved for that series, and I can't say I enjoyed it because it was a really, really tough book. It was a tough read. There were a lot of heavy themes in that book, necessary things, but heavy. But I'm definitely probably gonna read it again because it was that good. It was written almost like an epic, but it was like an American epic, you know, and it was also kind of like a horror story, but it's a very real story. I'm getting off course. Let me just explain what it's about. Right, so this woman named Seth, she was a former slave and she ended up living in this place in Kentucky, Mississippi, somewhere in the South, and she decided to live there with her kids. But she had to kill one of them when her slave master came back. She was afraid that the slave master would come back, take her and her family, and they'd be put back into slavery again. She didn't want that for her kids, so she ended up killing one of them before she realized that the slave master wouldn't be able to take her and her family. And the ghost of that murdered baby kind of just haunted their house for bricks until that murder baby ended up coming back in corporeal form, in the form of Beloved, because that was the name of the baby that Seth ended up killing. And basically this is the story of Seth kind of learning how to grieve and process and end up eventually letting go. And it tackles a lot of important themes, and especially shows a lot of important themes to do with Black history and Black American history. So I highly recommend you read it if you haven't yet. It's really, Toni Morrison's book is one of those books that are like a necessary read. It was so good. The next book I read this month was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I actually, surprisingly, I've heard a lot of like mixed reviews on BookTube, but I actually gave it a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It was a pretty good book. I feel like the main reason people didn't end up liking it is because President Snow is the protagonist. Let me just give you guys the breakdown what the book was about. This book was about President Snow. Obviously it was Cornelius, some shit like that. I'm just calling like Corey. Coriolanus, I remembered his name. I'm sorry, it's just like, if you watch like my vlog reading that video, it's literally like, I'm just gonna link it down below. I struggled so hard with pronouncing his name, but Coriolanus Snow was basically this kid in this academy, and he was trying to be ambitious. He's trying to make it to the top. He's trying to bring glory back to his family name, yada yada yada. So the games are going on. The games have only been going on for about 4 years now, but they're trying to introduce this thing in order to make the games more engaging for the capital, so that way it can continue to go on and on. They can continue to oppress the district people. So they're introducing mentors for the first time, and Coriolanus and his other classmates kind of become mentors for these new kids, and Coriolanus ends up becoming a mentor for District 12. And basically, like, they kind of just follow Coriolanus trying to find a way to make him and his mentee win, and just, you know, thrive and thrive and just become the most powerful man ever. And I did end up liking this book. I felt like, this isn't really a spoiler, but I felt like the last third of the book was kind of trash. It was kind of trash, but for the most part, I did enjoy it. Even though Coriolanus was a very infuriating character, I did enjoy reading from his perspective and kind of seeing how Susan Collins describes the mind of a bigot. I found that like really, really interesting. And I found other characters incredibly interesting as well, including Lucy Baird. That's kind of the main reason I stayed in the story. I don't know, it was interesting seeing how the Hunger Games came to be, how certain things came to be, because Coriolanus kind of just helped institute a lot more of the things that we saw in the Hunger Games when Katniss goes into it. So it's interesting seeing that build up too. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, just because Susan Collins has such a good way of writing. It doesn't even matter if you fucking like hate the character, like, she has a good way of writing. Again, the third part of the book maybe could have gone, maybe didn't have to be there, but I did enjoy like most of the books. I still give it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I am partial to the Hunger Games because the Hunger Games. The next book I read was He Said, She Said by Kwame Alexander. And Kwame Alexander is an author I'm just like recently familiarizing myself with, though he's been writing for like a while. But this is the first book I read of his, and it's literally a black romance written in 2013. In 2013, so imagine how misogynistic it kind of is. But despite like all of the kind of problematic elements of the story, I did end up enjoying it and giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Let me explain. This book is about these 2 high schoolers that go to this school in the South, these 2 black high school students, and basically what happens is that the school isn't getting enough funding, and they end up cutting things, especially the arts. Once the arts are cut, the 2 students, there's a guy and then there's a girl, and y'all know how it goes. They end up working together in order to make sure that their school has funding, in order to fight the system that is ruining their school and like everything that they love about it. So yada yada yada, that's basically the entirety of the book. And I found it incredibly enjoyable, mainly because like the comedy in it was so freaking good. Like, I was laughing the entire time. This book very easily could have been a miss for me, but there was something about it. It was just so funny, and it was so enjoyable, and it was nice seeing like black love on the page. I felt that was the first book I read where it was like the entirety of the book was a romance for black people, and it was nice. The next book I read was The Inexplicable Logic of My Life, and I ended up giving this about 3 stars, I believe. It's basically this book about this Mexican-American teen. He's going through a lot of changes in this book. He's becoming a singer. He has to apply to colleges. His grandma ends up getting cancer. His dad ends up being in a relationship again. And through all of that, he has this inexplicable anger in him that's starting to arise in senior year. He's getting into fights with people. Basically, this is his coming of age story, and it's basically just the protagonist figuring out what it is that he wants to be, like who he is and all of that. It's just this whole story about family and friendship and just about life. I don't know, I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars because it was a decent book, but for me, it was kind of too simply written. You know how like some books, they do like really simple sentence things? They write with that throughout the entire book, and that's like their writing style. And it was a little too simply written for me. I ended up finding myself being a bit bored. I found the characters incredibly interesting. They're dynamic, incredibly interesting. And I felt like there were a lot of interesting plot points, but I wasn't enthralled by the book. Even though I know it has very important themes, there were a lot of moments that were just like really sweet to me, so I would recommend it because it is, I guess you could call it a kind of fluff book. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those like books about life, but it also kind of shows the most beautiful parts of it. For that, I gave it a 3 stars. I did like moderately enjoy it, but I wouldn't say I was enthralled by it. You know, I wasn't like gripped by the story or anything, but I did appreciate the LGBTQ plus representation, even though it wasn't through the protagonist, which I was expecting. The next book I read was The Beauty That Remains by Ashley Woodfolk, and I also gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. It's this book that follows the perspectives of 3 characters, and they're all basically trying to find a way to grieve their recently lost loved one. You basically just follow these 3 characters whose lives somehow intertwine through music, and that's basically what the entire story is about. I give it 3 out of 5 stars because I did moderately enjoy it. I enjoyed how it showed how like you cope with grief in like this modern world in the 21st century, where it might even be harder to overcome like grief when you have constant online reminders of the presence of the soul that just left the earth. I really enjoyed that theme a lot. I found the characters pretty interesting, but I just felt like the book was almost trying to do too much in one book. There were so many characters involved because it was from 3 perspectives, and those 3 characters weren't exactly the closest of friends, so you had to deal with like multiple like side characters, and it was just a lot. And then they were also all written in first person, which made it kind of confusing when it switched perspectives because I was reading it on my phone, and I don't know, it was just a little difficult for me to follow what was happening. Plus like the ending, I found the ending just a little bit unsatisfying, but I did enjoy the queer representation a lot. I found like the most compelling storyline, I forgot the character's name, the most compelling storyline was of the singer and kind of just him trying to get over his ex-boyfriend who died because of a suicide, and that was one of the most compelling storylines for me. For that, I give it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read is I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. It's actually written by 2 authors. One of them is a white woman and one of them is a black woman, because it takes place from 2 perspectives, one of a black girl, one of a white girl. So basically what happens is that this riot ends up breaking out during one of the football games at the school, and these 2 characters end up having to stick together in order to survive the night of the riots. And it was based off the California riots, I believe, of '92. It involves all the racial tensions that have been going on, probably like the underlying currents of the Rodney King case. I felt like I had high expectations going in and it just didn't meet those expectations, just because it was one of those books where instead of kind of allowing you to learn like and subtly read through the lines in order to discover a lesson, it kept on just saying like preachy things to your face. And I didn't enjoy the fact that the black girl is focused. Well, I didn't enjoy how the black girl basically had to be the teacher in this book. That's literally what we're seeing right now, where like some like non-black people end up asking black people,
oh, how can I help? What resources should I find? Oh, yada yada yada. Like, how exactly is this racist?
That was basically what the black protagonist in this book was doing for the white protagonist. Why does the black girl feel the need to explain every single freaking like racial dynamic thing to this white character? Like, there's no reason why the white character should be that obtuse and naive. The white character literally came off as like dead ass like stupid throughout the entire book, and she irritated me the most. But what irritated me even more than that was the way that the black character somehow had to be the teacher for this white character. I found like the black characters, like all the side black characters, really interesting. The black protagonist's entire kind of just personal life really interesting. I enjoyed that part of the book a lot, but I didn't really like the white character at all. Sorry, not sorry. And I know those people exist and that was kind of the whole purpose, but she came off ignorant to the point of like stupidity. I think I gave this like a 2 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. The next book I read was More Happy Than Not, and I gave that book a 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Basically, this teenager named Aaron Soto, he is trying to get over the loss of his dad. His dad ended up committing suicide a few months ago, and he's kind of just been struggling with it ever since, and so has his entire family. And he's trying to get over that, also trying to maintain his relationship with his girlfriend. And in the midst of getting over all of that, he ends up becoming friends with this guy named Thomas. There's this kind of like semi-mystical sci-fi element to the book that involves like memory erasing. It's like this business is taking place where you can kind of erase your memories of an entire instant, of an entire person, things like that. And Aaron kind of gets involved with that company in a certain way, but basically it tackles a lot of themes of gay acceptance and internalized homophobia and things like that. And it was so good. And I think this was Adam Silvera's debut novel, so I was surprised about how good it was, but it was really spectacular. I'm sad because I can't say much about it without spoiling it, but I enjoyed it. The next book I read was The Lost Coast, and it's basically this book that follows this teenage girl. I forgot her name. I'm forgetting the name of literally all the protagonists. I apologize, but it's about this teenage girl who's kind of just trying to make her way to this new place in California, and she ends up meeting these group of teenage girls called the Greys. The Greys had called that protagonist over in order to figure out about what happened to one of their members. I believe her name is Imogen. So Imogen, she's kind of just like disappeared from her body, and basically like the protagonist's job is to find her soul, bring her back, and like figure out exactly what happened to her and everything like that. I will give kudos to this book for educating me a little bit more about like the asexual spectrum and just like the sexual spectrum in general. I didn't know as much about it, and I feel like this book kind of prompted me to do more research about it, which was nice. I feel like I learned more about the LGBTQ plus community from this book than I did from any other book, but it was boring. It dragged. It jumped times and perspectives a lot, and there was just a lot of like quirkiness. Like I hate it when a book tries too hard to be quirky, and that's what this book really did. Like one of the characters was afraid of dating this boy because she was afraid she appeared too normal to the other Grays, and I was like, okay, sis, I hate tryhards. I hate it. I don't think I even ended up finishing this book. I jumped to the end to figure out what the ending was because the storyline was decently interesting, but it was just too much of, I don't know. It was just a lot. The next book I read was probably one of my favorite books, even though I didn't rate it 5 out of 5 stars, that I read this month, and it was Highly Illogical Behavior. And it's basically this book about this guy that is agoraphobic, which means he's afraid of being in spaces that may cause him embarrassment or anxiety of any kind of sorts, and he has this intense anxiety for outside spaces. So he hasn't been outside in about 5 years, and this one girl that is from the high school, or the school he used to go to, decides that for her college essay she's going to fix this protagonist, to cure him of his anxiety. She goes to his house and they end up deciding to be friends. It's just a lot of fluff going on, but then a love triangle finds its way through. The girl ends up having a boyfriend that she ends up bringing over for their hangouts, and there is this love triangle that ends up going on. I ended up really liking this book because, for one, I felt like the friendship in it was so natural and so just nice to read. Like, I'm pretty sure I read the entire book with a smile on my face. Like, it was that enjoyable. It was nice to see these friends being so accepting of his anxiety, kind of just like being, you know, like chill about it, like allowing him to feel what he needs to feel. So yeah, that was one of my favorite books that I read this month. The last book I read this month was Queens of Geek. It's adorable. It's about this protagonist named... So basically the book follows 3 characters. It focuses on 2 characters named Charlie and Taylor. Charlie's bi, and she's kind of coming to grips with getting over her ex, who was a boy, and kind of finding love in one of her idols. Taylor is trying to find a way to enjoy the con that they're visiting without, you know, being overcome by her anxiety. I haven't even explained what the book's about yet. So basically, like, these 3 teenagers end up going to this con, which is basically like Comic Con, but, you know, fictional. They all visited there, and they're all from Australia for some reason. Now, honestly, it doesn't really matter for the plot, but I'm not complaining. They all ended up coming to America for this Comic-Con like event, and they're all trying to find a way to break out of the boxes that kind of kept them down previously. This is kind of a book that doesn't really show like all the terrible things that happened to them before, but a book that shows how they're choosing to grow from those terrible things that happened to them before. So I liked it because it actually had a lot of like complex characters, despite the fact that there were a lot of Disney moments. I feel like the Disney moments just made it like a really happy story. Like the way I described it in my review, I believe, is like it felt like a Disney Channel episode where like just a ton of good things happened to the character, and they kind of learned pretty quickly from their mistakes somehow, miraculously, in a way that we all kind of wish we would. But you know, I enjoyed it. I read it and it just put a smile on my face, so I can't really complain. Anyway, those are all the books that I ended up reading this month. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, you should like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on my social medias. It will all be linked down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.